A few years ago, we made a video about the Uncanny Valley, which is the phenomenon where humans react negatively to computer-generated faces that are almost, but not quite human-like. The video generated a lot of discussion in the comments section. A common question was why the Uncanny Valley exists at all. Some people believe it's because they're actually seeing robots and not computer-generated images. But this doesn't really make sense, since the Uncanny Valley also applies to CGI characters like Gollum from Lord of the Rings or the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. It's not just humanoid robots that trigger our revulsion. Humanoid avatars on a screen can produce the same effect too. So what exactly is it about these near-human faces that makes us feel so uncomfortable? Why do we instinctively recoil when we see them? And will we ever overcome the Uncanny Valley? This is the space race. Today we're talking about why AI faces trigger the Uncanny Valley. Most people are familiar with the term artificial intelligence, but most of us can't actually name a practical application of the technology in our daily lives. We hear about new AI advancements in the news all the time, but those applications are usually pretty obscure. Most of us don't work in labs or have friends who do. So the idea of an AI revolution seems more like a science fiction trope than a real possibility. But there's a good chance you interact with AI every day without even knowing it. For example, AI is used by modern facial recognition technology to analyze your face and unlock your phone or verify your identity. You might take your Face ID for granted if you use it every day, but think about how strange it is that a machine can tell who you are just by looking at your face. We take it for granted because it works so well. But facial recognition is actually one of the most challenging computations in all of computer science. Machines have only been able to recognize human faces reliably in the last decade or so. What does this mean for the future of AI? How close are we to creating machines that look and act like us? And how will society change when we reach that milestone? These are the kinds of questions we'll explore on this channel. So be sure to subscribe if you want to join us on this journey. In 1970, the robotics researcher Masahiro Mori described a phenomenon he called the Uncanny Valley. He noticed that humans tend to feel uncomfortable around humanoids that look almost human but not quite. In other words, the valley represents the dip in our emotional response between human and non-human. As we'll discuss later, this isn't really a physical valley. It's a conceptual one that's been reinforced by our biological programming. According to evolutionary psychology, this programming kicks in whenever we encounter something that looks almost but not quite like us. Think about the movie Get Out. The main character, David, is a robot designed to look like a young boy. At first, David's caretaker feels affection for the robot, but then she starts to notice its imperfections. David's movements aren't quite right. His eyes blink erratically, and his speech patterns are off. And the more she interacts with him, the more uneasy she feels. Eventually, her discomfort turns into revulsion, and she throws David away. Like many movies, this story has some serious flaws. But from a psychological perspective, it makes sense. Our brains evolved to detect minute variations in human faces, because survival depended on our ability to read other people's expressions. If a person looked just a little bit off, it could be a sign of disease or deformity. So it's in our best interest to avoid them. Even today, we have a biological preference for faces that conform to what's considered attractive, and we naturally gravitate toward people who look healthy and fit because they're less likely to die and drag us down. That's why we feel uncomfortable around humanoids that seem human, but we're not sure why. We're just programmed to be cautious. But what does this mean for the future of AI? Will we ever overcome the Uncanny Valley? If so, how long will it take? And how will society change once we reach that point? To answer these questions, let's talk about some of the best examples of AI faces. Jason Trost is a computer graphics researcher at NVIDIA. He's responsible for developing some of the most realistic CGI faces in the industry. Trost's latest project is a virtual human named Geminoid F. The project was a collaboration between NVIDIA, the University of Alberta, and Osaka University. The goal was to create the most realistic digital replica of a human face ever. Unlike previous projects, Geminoid F doesn't just mimic a person's appearance. It also replicates their mannerisms, blinking patterns, breathing, and even the way they respond to conversation. To create Geminoid F, Trost and his colleagues scanned an Osaka University professor named Hiroshi Ishiguro. Ishiguro is considered one of the leading experts on human robotics. He's also the director of the university's Intelligent Robotics Laboratory. It's unclear what Ishiguro thinks of the hyper-realistic AI version of himself. But this isn't the first time he's been replicated. In 2003, Ishiguro's head was scanned to create an android named Actroid F. The android was a breakthrough at the time, because it had lifelike facial expressions. Unfortunately for Ishiguro, the robot bears a striking resemblance to Halle Berry, so it's often mistaken for her. This isn't surprising given that most androids are based on famous actresses. Early attempts at humanoids were modeled after people like Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn and Sigourney Weaver. But things have changed in the last half-century. Nowadays, most humanoid robots are modeled after Japanese schoolgirls. This is probably because Japanese culture places a high value on cuteness, and schoolgirls are considered the ultimate kawaii. Not only are they cute, but they also represent purity and innocence. Unfortunately, many of these robots end up looking like Siri or Alexa, because they're recreated by men who have unrealistic expectations of what women look like. There's no doubt that AI faces have come a long way in the last few decades, but the question remains, why do they trigger our revulsion? Is it just because they remind us of robots, or is there something more going on here? Well, researchers have conducted several experiments to find out. One of the most revealing studies was published in the journal Royal Society, Open Science in 2016. Researchers at the University of Minnesota and the University of California, San Diego created 4 different types of faces: realistic human faces, cartoon faces, realistic non-human faces, and cartoon non-human faces. They then showed these faces to 56 participants while monitoring their eye movements. What they found was that people spent significantly less time looking at uncanny faces than other faces. This suggests that we process uncanny faces differently than human and non-human faces. Another study published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology had similar results. Researchers showed participants a series of human and AI faces and asked them to rate each face on a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of attractiveness, trustworthiness, and likability. The participants consistently rated uncanny faces as being less attractive, trustworthy, and likable than human and non-human faces. So it seems like we're hardwired to avoid faces that are almost human but not quite. This raises the question, will we ever overcome the uncanny valley? There's no easy answer. On the one hand, we've learned to accept animals that look like Frankenstein's monster. Dogs like Chihuahuas and Yorkshire Terriers have been selectively bred for centuries. People love them despite their unconventional looks. This suggests that we can overcome the uncanny valley if we're willing to put in the effort. On the other hand, we haven't been able to domesticate cats yet. Some people say this is because cats are too independent or aloof, but it could also be because they haven't evolved to look like what we consider attractive. The truth is, we don't know if we'll ever overcome the uncanny valley. It all depends on how much we value human-robot interaction. If it's important to us, then we'll find a way to make it happen. If not, then the uncanny valley will remain just that, something that we find creepy and unsettling. So what do you think? Will we ever overcome the uncanny valley? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.